Yeah.
Welcome back to the Gridiron Expert. The rebuilding process at Nebraska is taking a little longer than expected. Scott Frost enters year 3 in Lincoln trying to make this blue blood program relevant again, but has gone just 9-15 in the past 2 years. Nebraska did show a little sign of improvement last year, going 5-7 with 4 losses decided by 1 possession. That showed that Nebraska did have the talent to get to the postseason last year, but their youth and inexperience and some injuries as well played a major role in that. Hopefully the luck can change for the better in 2020 as Nebraska returns 11 starters, including 7 on offense and 4 on defense. Their biggest playmaker, of course, is their quarterback in Adrian Martinez. The health of Adrian Martinez is vital to Nebraska's success. He needs to work a little bit on his accuracy and decision making, but he's a very good dual threat quarterback, rushing for 626 yards and 7 touchdowns last year. He returns his running back in Dedrick Mills, but the big news coming out of Nebraska as of late is that their leading wide receiver, JD Spielman, has entered the transfer portal, decided to transfer about the second week of June, and that's going to be a major blow to this Nebraska offense, as now tight end Jack Stoll and Wan'Dale Robinson must step up to catch passes from Adrian Martinez. This is a Nebraska team that offensively was not great last year, but more than anything has to do better of protecting the football as they fumbled 27 times in 2019. So still some pieces to clear up there, but certainly going to be the strength of this Nebraska team in 2020 as their defense only returns 4 starters. The front 7 is very weak, not very experienced, not very deep, which means the secondary is going to be the strength on defense for Nebraska, led by Cam Taylor-Britt and DiCaprio Bootle. So that's going to be the key for Nebraska this year, and as we all know, we're not expecting them to win the West, we're not expecting them to make the playoff. Scott Frost just needs to get the Cornhuskers to the postseason to show that they're continuing to progress, they're continuing to get better, and that he is the right man for the job. Because that seat is slowly starting to heat up. They open up the season against Purdue here, jumping straight into Big Ten Conference play. That's not what you want for a Nebraska team that still has some pieces to put together and is still trying to improve. You're jumping in straight into a conference game. No room for error. But I do think they get the win here over the Boilermakers. This is a Purdue team that Nebraska actually lost to last year, 31-27. That was on the road against a very beat-up Purdue team. Nebraska was winning 27-24 before allowing the game-winning touchdown with just a little over a minute left. If Purdue is fully healthy, they're going to give Nebraska a run for their money in Week 1. But Scott Frost knows his team cannot afford to drop a Big Ten Conference game at home to kick off the season. They need this win. And with Nebraska's fans being some of the most faithful and devoted in the entire country, I think Big Red gets a win at home to kick off 2020. I do think they defeat Central Michigan, and I do think they defeat South Dakota State. Neither of those teams we mark down as automatic wins because both those teams could give Nebraska a very tough test. Jim McElwain did a fantastic job with the Chippewas last year, got into a MAC championship game, but they lose a couple key starters that I think Nebraska will be fine with. And then South Dakota State, out of the FCS, gave Minnesota a very tough test last year to begin the season. Gave North Dakota State, the eventual FCS national champions, a very tough test with College Game Day in town. So this is not a game that either Nebraska can overlook for Central Michigan or South Dakota State, but should start the season off at 3-0. They then take on Cincinnati, and this is certainly a game you cannot mark down as an automatic victory or a game you should assume Nebraska will win, because the Bearcats have 10 returning starters on defense from a unit that ranked 24th in the country last year in scoring, allowing just 20.6 points per game. They finished 2019 at 11-3. Luke Fickell's doing a phenomenal job with the Bearcats. They could be a New Year's Six bowl contender in 2020. They now come into Nebraska, a program that has struggled against inferior opponents. South Alabama was not that great. They lost to Troy a few years ago. Nearly lost to Arkansas State a few years ago. Lost to Northern Illinois a few years ago. Cincinnati could join that list to either beat or give Nebraska a very, very tough test. But once again, I think Scott Frost gets the job done. I think the secondary does extremely well for Nebraska in this game. Shuts down Cincinnati's passing attack led by Desmond Ridder. Martinez makes just enough plays, and Nebraska escapes with a close victory over the Bearcats. They are 4-0. So just like that, they've almost matched last year's win total. They're 2 wins away from making the postseason. And as you can see by their schedule, if they want to get to the postseason, they have to do it within their first 7 games. Because that back 5 is absolutely brutal. So 4-0 start. Not too bad for Scott Frost in year 3. They then go on the road to face off against Northwestern. That was an abysmal game last year. That was a terrible game between Northwestern and Nebraska, with the Cornhuskers winning just 13-10. Very low scoring game, largely due in part to how great Northwestern's defense was last year. They're pretty dang good considering they went 3-9. But their offense is going to be a lot better. They land Peyton Ramsey, the transfer quarterback out of Indiana. Isaiah Bowser should return at running back. They have a very experienced core of wide receivers, and their defense returns 9 starters, mostly led by juniors and seniors. Last year's 3-9 season for Pat Fitzgerald was a fluke. And I think Northwestern gets a big win over Nebraska at home, handing the Cornhuskers their first loss. The downfall for Northwestern in 2019 was how bad their offense was. They couldn't move the ball. They will be able to do that in 2020. The defense will be better than it was last year. They might have a chance to even get back to the postseason this year. Nebraska then comes back home to take on Illinois, a team they defeated 42-38 on the road last year. That was a great game, and that was a game that made Nebraska 3-1 last year before they took on Ohio State. So 42-38 against a Fighting Illini team that went bowling in 2019. Now Lovie Smith's squad looking to make it to a second straight bowl game with 9 returning starters on offense. This is a team that really will challenge Nebraska's defense, especially the weak front 7. Especially the weak front 7, because they've got a great core of wide receivers and they've got a much better and improved running game. But Nebraska was able to go on the road last year and beat Illinois. I think they do beat Illinois at home this year. Even though the Fighting Illini are maybe trending up, so is Nebraska. They get another close victory and have now matched last season's win total, 5-1 going into their bye week. Maybe top 25 by this point, who knows? But they're 1 win away from making a bowl game, and they will clinch bowl eligibility right after the bye week with a win at Rutgers. Now, this is not a game Nebraska can overlook. This is a major trap game for me, for Nebraska. They're coming off a week of rest. Greg Schiano is going to have the Scarlet Knights contending in the majority of their games. That does not mean that they're going to win the majority of their games, but they're going to be much more competitive than you've seen over the past few years under Chris Ash. And Nebraska made a little groggy after a week of rest, having to travel out east to New Jersey to take on the Scarlet Knights, who should improve defensively as well. Just saying you need to be cautious. But I do think Nebraska gets the job done. And just like that, they're 6-1. They're going bowling, which means they don't have to worry too much about this last 5 games this season because they're probably not going to win many of them. That starts with at Ohio State on Halloween. The last time that Nebraska visited Columbus, they only lost by 5 points. It was a respectable showing, and Nebraska went 4-8 that year. But last year, at Nebraska, with College Game Day there, all eyes in the country watching that game in Lincoln, Ohio State annihilated the Cornhuskers 48-7. Expect a similar beatdown this year in Columbus. Nebraska loses to Ohio State, as will many teams this year. That offense simply will be too much. With Justin Fields as a dual-threat quarterback, Trey Sermon at running back, and a very good core of wide receivers, Nebraska's defense will be no match for Ohio State's offense. They then take on Penn State to kick off November. And this is a game that Nebraska is very lucky to host, and more of a trap game for Penn State than anything else. Because Nebraska is catching Penn State after a very tough 3-game stretch of Iowa, Ohio State, and a road game at Indiana. They play 3 games during that little stretch in October and then have to come to Nebraska. And Penn State usually has a little bit of a hangover when they lose. So if they were to lose to Ohio State, if they were to lose at Indiana, which is no pushover this year, they might be a little hungover coming into Lincoln and Scott Frost's squad could catch the Nittany Lions off guard. I do not think that's going to be the case, but it's something to watch out for. I think Nebraska loses here. I think Penn State, once again, kind of like Ohio State, simply has too much offensive talent for Nebraska to stop. They then go on the road to Iowa, a team that Nebraska usually plays extremely well, and that includes last year when they fell to the Hawkeyes 27-24 in Lincoln with bowl eligibility on the line. Keith Duncan kicked a game-winning field goal to keep Scott Frost and his team home for the holidays, but this Iowa defense at Kinnick Stadium, it's hard to beat them. It's so difficult to beat them at Kinnick Stadium. And this defense ranked 5th in the country last year when it came to scoring defense, allowing just 14 points per game. So while I do think Nebraska puts up a very, very good fight, I don't think they have enough to go on the road and win this game. Once again, it comes down to how well can their offense move the ball against elite defenses in Northwestern and Ohio State and Penn State. Not to say Northwestern's elite, but you get what I'm saying. Experienced defenses. I think Nebraska takes another L here. 3 losses now in a row. Make it 4 on the road against Wisconsin. Once again, an elite defense that ranked 4th in total defense in 2019. Nebraska allowed 188.1 rushing yards per game in 2019. Keep in mind, they let up a lot last year when they lost to Wisconsin, 37-21. But we know Wisconsin's going to pound the rock. We know Wisconsin's going to try to run it down your throat. And even though they don't have Jonathan Taylor, they're still going to be very dangerous with their ground game. Nebraska's front 7 is still too weak and inexperienced to shut down a dangerous running team like Wisconsin, especially at Camp Randall Stadium. They fall to the Badgers for their 4th straight loss. They're now sitting at 6-5, going bowling regardless, but they have a chance to maybe spoil Minnesota's Big Ten title hopes. Depending on how Wisconsin fares over the course of the season, depending on how Minnesota fares over the course of the season, this game could be huge in determining who wins the Big Ten West. Nebraska lost to Minnesota 34-7 last year on the road. I think Nebraska pulled up a monster upset to conclude 2020. They upset the Golden Gophers. Yes, they lost by 27 in 2019. But I look at home field advantage yet again. They're getting this game at home against P.J. Fleck and the Golden Gophers. Minnesota's defense is going to be great again. They were 10th in total defense last year, but I don't think they're going to be as good as they were last year. And I don't think they're going to be as good as some of the defenses Nebraska will have faced in Wisconsin, Iowa, Penn State, and Ohio State. It almost might seem like a little bit of a break. So they get a little bit of a weaker defense in Minnesota coming to town. Nebraska's clinched bowl eligibility, but Minnesota, with maybe a lot of pressure on them, might fall in this game. Keep in mind, they were 1 win away last year from winning the Big Ten West. That was a home game against Wisconsin, and they lost by 21 points. Can they handle the pressure if they're put in that situation again? And for now, I'm saying no. I think Scott Frost gets that signature win he's been looking for. They upset P.J. Fleck and the Golden Gophers, and Nebraska finishes year 3 of the Scott Frost era at 7-5. Now, is that something to get excited about? If you're Nebraska, absolutely. They've suffered for too long now. Haven't been to a bowl game since 2016. Scott Frost would get them there with a chance at an 8-win season. Things are trending up in Lincoln. They've had to suffer for a few years. I do think Scott Frost is the right man for the job, though. This is the year that he has to make something happen. And right now, we believe he can do just that. So guys, thank you so much for watching us here at The Gridiron Expert on YouTube. Make sure to continue to like, comment, and subscribe, and check out everything we have for you down in the description below. Exclusive college football news, content, and offers that you do not want to miss. So make sure to check it all out. And once again, as always, thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you next time right here on The Gridiron Expert.